morning, everyone. Welcome to episode 10 at the Blowback Roundtable. We have a real large roundtable today. The title of our show today is Public Relations versus Diplomacy. So this week, we saw these images from Mr. Zelensky doing a world tour, and we're contrasting that with actual diplomacy, such as the diplomacy going on right now at BRICS. The BRICS Summit is the first day of the BRICS Summit. So SL Kanthan is joining us from Bangalore. We have Leo Zhao joining us from Berlin. We've got Carlo and Ben as usual. So there's so much to discuss, but I think we're going to start with either BRICS or the jet fighters that were on their way, and then they're not on their way all of a sudden. So let's throw it over to Ben. Ben, what's going on this week? What's changed?
Well, since the weekend, I have to say, because it's been very busy, I've been gathering this news. I've tracked these two paths, and one was Mr. Zelensky, who's trying to prove to everyone that he's still useful, going from European nation to European nation, basically not even resting. You know, he just went. He was in Amsterdam first to meet with Mark Rutte. Then he went to Helsinki, to Athens, and Athens, Greece. I think that's where he is right now, right? So Denmark, Sweden, the Dutch, and then Greece. And everybody everywhere was first about the Gripens, but then they said, no, you're not going to have those. Sorry. Then it was 64 F-16s, but then he said, no, that's all we have. We didn't actually tell you numbers, and we're not going to send them during war. But he's doing the big PR thing everywhere. He sat that's the picture you saw, once in a blood red F-16, like a display F-16, and this was the other one. I think this was in Amsterdam.
That's the Ghost of Kiev right there.
Yes, Mr. Ghost of Kiev. He cosplayed once with his wife to show, oh, this is really exciting. Basically high without flying. Sorry to say that, but that was his tour. And on the other hand, we have the heavyweights who have just arrived. The first photos are in, the first videos are in Johannesburg, South Africa, where because of the ICC shenanigans, Mr. Putin will not be present, only televised. But as you can see, Xi Jinping, this is the 15th BRICS summit, has been welcomed by President Ramaphosa on the bloody tarmac. The last one who was to arrive was Modi. He was met by the vice president, so high-ranking. Mr. Lavrov was greeted by dancing people and everything. Obviously, the first one to arrive was founding member Lula, just like a badass with the sunglasses. And it has begun. 40-something countries, over 1,200 delegates. It's just huge. But I already read the preemptive Western messages. It's going to be a failure. It doesn't matter. It's just a set of photo ops. It's nothing. So I thought we would kick off with this, the contrast between these two. There's a lot of detail to add to both sides. A lot going to be discussed in Johannesburg, and a whole lot of nothing going around in Ukraine. And obviously there's the allies, the US, Europe, and Oceania basically all sinking. But I would like to welcome also Kanthan and Leo Zhao back to our season and maybe get some thoughts. Mr. Kanthan, I think you could go first because your prolific Twitter feeds, one of them compared this to the Bandung Conference, 1955, the original Global South gathering where the decolonial movement, well, the hope of it was first initiated. And I think that was just spot on.
Yeah. So BRICS has been kind of on the low mode for a long time. And so it wasn't really until 2009, when the great financial crisis happened. That's when it really dawned upon Russia and China and others that, hey, so maybe this the Western domination, the dollar hegemony, the Western financial system is just a Ponzi scheme, and maybe there is an opportunity for the global South to rise again. But even then, they didn't go, full-fledged. And it wasn't until 2015 that they started the new development bank and they were never really thought of. I mean, the expansion of BRICS, but now it's slowly coming together, and now they. So I think the war in Ukraine and the Western sanctions on Russia, it really woke up people, because they were like, oh my God, they could just steal all of our foreign exchange reserves. They could, fund the Nazis, blow up the Nord Stream pipeline, and they can do whatever they want, but there's no rule. And the weaponization of the legal system, the international bodies, the financial systems, I think they all basically woke up the BRICS from kind of a slumber. And in the last year, the vision of a multipolar world has really accelerated. And as you said, this conference, I mean, it could be, so let's not but count the chicken before the eggs are hatched. But this could be the game changer conference that could start a some form of the BRICS. The currency, or at least a new framework for all the BRICS members to use the local currencies for the imports and the exports with each other. And that's one possibility. And the number two is the new development bank. And the number three is our de-dollarization in terms of borrowing money and trading with one another. And if you look at the PPP GDP of BRICS, but just the five countries, it has surpassed the G7.
Yep.
And now, if you have, so now 40 more countries they want to join BRICS, 40, and about half of them have done the formal application. So, and this includes the heavyweights like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Nigeria, and Iran. Yeah. So just imagine if, like, say, the Saudis, the Iranians, Venezuela, Nigeria, and they all join. Oh my God! They could start. They could replace the petrodollar with petro BRICS currency, and they would have the world's the largest reserves in terms of oil and gas, and they can determine how they're going to sell. And China is the largest buyer of natural gas and oil, and they're already using the Chinese yuan to buy Russian oil and gas. So this could be a huge game changer. But there is a small lesson for us to learn from the Bandung conference, which happened in 1955 in Bandung, Indonesia, right? But then what happened was it didn't go anywhere. The U.S. and others, they staged a coup in Indonesia, and they killed a lot of the African leaders. They started, the color revolution, or coups like in Egypt and Syria, and the prime minister of India was also, assassinated by the CIA apparently in the 1960s. So the movement for the global south, fell apart. So there is a small possibility that the global south is going to screw this major opportunity as well. So we have to be very careful and we have to pray for the best.
Yeah. As you said, not to put the cart before the horse, but I really am hopeful. I can explain why later, but perhaps someone else would like to join in.
Leo, any thoughts? I definitely have some comments, and thanks very much, Kanthan, for that commentary. That was very good. But you bring up a great point, Leo. Did you want to go before I grandstand?
Well, sure. I mean, compared to before, when the global South countries came together and held conferences, I think this time, I think the explicit ideological uh, statements are not there, right? There is no political ideological drive that unites these countries together. And it is a purely economic uh, collaboration, which once we understand the geopolitics and the ideology, we understand that this is the only way to actually achieve ideological ends. I think there is a like many people have made this observation, but I think there is a implicit anti-imperialist uh, agreement or a similar framework, frame of mind, view of the world that these countries share. That whether they are right wing governments, whether they are socialist governments, they all feel like, um, yeah, it's not fair the way things have been done. So yeah, it's incredibly hopeful. I think this is yeah, probably one of, yeah, in my lifetime, the most hopeful moment probably for the world, for the planet. But of course, what other people have said also is true, that we should not be too euphoric yet, because there's still a lot of variables, a lot of unknowns, and a lot of things can happen. The imperialists can and will try everything they can to disrupt um, and to stop this process from happening. And the Western press is so ridiculous. Like, they it's possible that the BRICS will start sanctioning people, other countries. It's possible. It's hypothetical. These hypotheticals, like, oh yeah, it will be horrible. They're horrible because they might do what we have been doing for 100 years. It's absolutely frightening. It's horrific that these brown people might do what we have been doing. It's just complete.
Or as Marco Rubio said, become resilient to sanction. That's what really scares him, I think.
Yeah.
Can I respond before Billy Bob does the grandstanding? Because you said no ideological unifying factor, and you're right. But Brzezinski's book, the famous one, The Grand Chessboard, he is the worst case scenario. His worst nightmare is if they are not united on ideological grounds, but simply by shared grievances from the US. I mean, politically, Saudi Arabia is not the same as China, and no one can make that point. But if they're on shared grievances for the last 50 years, it's amazing. So before I go on to the 1955 to 1990 period, I have something to add. I want to listen to Billy Bob's thoughts.
Okay.
Oh,
I was gonna dovetail off of Kanthan's warnings, and I was gonna try and underscore exactly what the U.S. did to Indonesia. I think Suharto was in power, and they overthrew him in a coup.
No, Sukarno was in power.
Okay, Sukarno was in
Suharto
power.
was the
Suharto followed him. They're very similar names.
yeah.
But what
Very different
followed
people.
was a genocide, a CIA-sponsored genocide of anybody who was identified as leftist. So educators, work organizers, workplace organizers, professors, anybody that was deemed on the left was just killed. And so from 1 million to 2 million Indonesians and East Timorians were killed during that time just because of, you know, the perceived threat of this ideological vision that was opposed to Western imperialism. So it's mind-boggling to understand what, you know, how the West behaves, but they eagerly, happily engage in genocide if they think that their interests are threatened. So they have no moral restraints and they have no hesitancy to do the very worst things that they can possibly think of. I mean, just think about it: killing 1 million people because they're thinking the wrong thoughts and their thoughts are a threat to us. It's crazy. And also it was really nice back then because that conference I learned from Kanthan was, co-hosted. India and Pakistan together were co-hosting it.
Imagine
Like,
that.
what a world that was back then. And the US really did a good job of destroying all that. The West did a great job of destroying all that. And they're going to try to do the same thing now. So we need I don't think they have as many cards to play. I don't think they're going to be successful, but they're definitely going to give it a shot. And Kanthan, I've seen you predict on Twitter that it's going to be by 2028, there needs to be a conventional war with China.
Yes.
That's kind of the thinking of the U.S. establishment.
Yeah. And they've been going at it for a long time. I was watching this video from 2004, and this professor and this author, he worked with Pentagon, and the topic of his speech was war with China by 2025. And he said that we've been planning this for 10 years, which means basically from 1994.
Wow.
It's just madness. And so, there are like a few things, one is the de-dollarization. And if it really picks up, that's going to affect the ability of the U.S., the military industrial complex to, fund their the perpetual wars and the 700 military bases or whatever. And the number two is that they want to stop with China from becoming number one, And so this is the big one to continue the American century and the domination of the Federal Reserve Bank and the European Central Bank, who've been like running this the Ponzi scheme. And if when I go on our social media, it is so shocking to me, like how for most people, they just cannot imagine that China is a reasonably successful country, or let alone is actually better than the West in so many ways, So, when I post these, photos or the videos of these freaking amazing metro stations in China, they look like museums or
Sci-fi. Yeah.
Yeah, sci-fi. And then the first reaction of so many people is, oh, this is Photoshop, this is fake, because
You weren't here last week. I mentioned that someone shared pictures of Pyongyang and what it looks like now, and the first reactions were, "Oh, that's an AI-generated picture," because it doesn't compute to them that could be Korea.
Yeah, and then I post this the chart from a Western think tank about the savings that the Chinese people have saved in their banks, in the checking and savings accounts, and it was like $16 trillion, and people
It's very
just
important.
cannot. Yeah, and people just cannot believe it. Like they have this the mental shock, and they go, "Well, is this in the U.S. dollars, or well, are you we're talking about the yuan?" Like, no, no, no. This is actually, it's like 140 trillion yuan, and if you do the conversion, it's like $16 trillion or
Wow.
something.
By the way,
So
Yeah.
that is significant. I don't think people realize, because we in the West are increasingly living paycheck to paycheck, that China is a savings culture, all of it. The entire nation is. So they are structurally, I think, allergic to basically welfareism. So there's no lazy stay-at-home, get money people there. No, no, no. People who work, you get the opportunities, you can get richer. But it's like, that's why the savings culture exists. You are given the opportunity to get ahead, not the
yeah.
guarantee. It's
I,
one of
I
those
just
misconceptions.
I
Go,
just
Carl.
wanted to say I just wanted to reprise the Indonesian situation historically, and then say something briefly about BRICS. And of course, it's an anecdote. My wife and I personally know Kathy Cadane, and Kathy Cadane was a journalist who got Richard Helms and John Martins, who was the attaché in the Indonesian embassy at the time, who passed the American hit list, literally a hit list, on to the Indonesian military to go out and murder 900,000 people, as Billy Bob has pointed out, and then subsequently another 250,000 in East Timor. And she simply went and put on a slinky dress, went to a bar where Richard Helms hung out, drank with Richard Helms, and got him to admit that she was involved in that he was involved in the slaughter. Same thing with Martins. They were very willing to talk about. And the famous quote that Martins left on the New York Times article that was subsequently published was, "Yes, we might have blood on our hands." Yeah, and they do. And Billy Bob is right on about that. Never underestimate these bastards. The brief thing I want to say about BRICS is I'm impressed by the fact that there is a connection between people who want to enter BRICS and good governance. And this is nowhere more apparent than in the Sahel. The tenant, the guy leading
Traore, the young Burkina Faso man.
yeah, well, yes, of course, and Mali and Guinea, they've all got impressive records. I can't remember his name, keeps escaping me, but the guy in Guinea, they had a roads program going. He has speeded that up and has added, I think, 7 more projects to the 2 they were initially doing. It's good governance for the people, and whenever you hear like there was a general on today the African station that I was on last week, and he was a retired general, and he was saying, "Look, it comes down. You want to talk about democracy? Democracy has to deliver, and if it doesn't deliver, you go to the forum of government for that particular place that delivers." And in the 4 instances, and I'm including Niger in this, in the 4 instances in which this has occurred in the Sahel, it's just a thought of a good example. And now that it has BRICS, and now that it has China behind it, now that it has Wagner in the wings, it's got a way of defending itself against the predators of the West. And those are some differences, and I'm like Leo, I'm hopeful. Very
Same here. The interim president of Guinea is called Dubaya, I think, not
That's
W.
it.
Bush, Dubaya. And he
Dubai.
already outlawed the extraction of raw minerals. You have to process them into higher level, higher grade here, right fucking here in Guinea. And then we'll sell it to whoever buys, That's
Right.
wonderful. I don't know if somebody had urgenter thoughts, but I wanted to reflect on this because I kind of understand what those people felt when this catalyst, the Ukraine intervention happened. Let's call it that, okay? Because I watched the last thing I watched before this show was Jyoti Bra having a conversation with Garland Nixon. Wonderful people, both of them. And basically the 1990s, I always get back to this. The Soviet Union, for one reason or the other, died. The Bandung Conference, 1955, Stalin was fresh in his grave, revisionism began, and it was difficult. I mean, the secret speech, it had a huge negative impact on the anti-imperial forces in the world. And in 1990, that was the break. I could see in my mum, I was just 10 years old at the time, that she and people who felt like her, like, okay, the hell's coming now. And it did in most of Eastern Europe. And it was, most of that force was gone. And when basically China becoming the absolutely insanely technical civilization, and Russia standing up to the bully and just burning all that crap up that was supposed to be undefeatable NATO Wunderwaffe gear, these people felt, oh, it's not the Soviet Union, but the anti-imperial fight is back, and if they can do it, we can do it. So I thought that was a worthy thing to bring up, because it was such a defeat in 1990, and in a stealth. This meeting, as well as BRICS, as well as the Belt and Road Initiative, separate but started at the same time, was at least a decade and a half in the making, kind of stealthily wise. So was the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The main points I await from this meeting is sort of the merging, not the merging, but the coordination of these three things and expansion. I'm not so interested in the currency. I think it's too early to talk about a shared gold-backed thing, maybe just the increasing of local currencies, but I'm really looking forward to expansion and these blocks that exist separately to become much more coordinated, becoming a UN 2.0, or at least an alternative to it. That's what I wanted to add in.
Yeah, so just a bunch of people from the U.S., they went to Saudi Arabia, I think last week or so. And so they're trying to create a new security framework with Saudi Arabia. And one of the key the requirements is to say that you're not going to sell the oil for Chinese yuan.
Yes.
Because when Xi Jinping, he went to Saudi Arabia in December. He said it openly, starting 2025, but you guys can start selling oil for yuan. So,
and who buys most of the Saudi oil? You know the answer. I know, I'm sure. Around 4 times as much as the US.
Yes. So the number one customer is China, right?
So I think. Go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, so if you look at the U.S., the imperialist the system, the dollar is backed by the military, because if you don't use the dollar, the military will come and knock on your door, and
the military is backed by the dollar. Circular.
Exactly. Okay, so it's like a virtuous cycle. They feed one another. It's a fantastic game. So and if you look at the desperation for these guys to start a war with China, and they're trying to make it into a self-fulfilling prophecy, just like what they did with Russia. They're trying to use with Taiwan as a bait, and they'll keep provoking China in the Taiwan Straits. And I wouldn't be surprised if something like the Gulf of Tonkin happens. Some ship sinks in the Taiwan Straits, and if they say that but China bombed that ship, like most of the people would totally believe that, and it doesn't matter. Like people just cannot but think. So, okay, I lost my train.
I'm still not sure China would react rashly, though. They've shown incredible restraint in the area.
Yeah, because but this is like with two different like modus operandi, so if you look at with China, they want peace. Okay, they are like the businessmen. Okay, they want their ships to go to ports. They want the trains to run on time safely. They want to sell things, buy things. Okay, for that kind of a business attitude, you want a peaceful relationship. Okay, so you want the Saudis and the Iranians and the Syrians, the Sunnis and the Shiites, the Russians and the Ukrainians, the Americans and the Cubans. From China's point of view, but they want all these people to get along with one another. Okay, because that benefits China's economic model. They get to sell more, they get to trade more. But for the U.S., the goal is to divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Okay, so because one, there is like a lot of business in selling arms, but more importantly, it's about preserving the dollar, the hegemony, the spying, the control of all the leaders. So for that kind of the system, they need to have all these conflicts all over the world. So they want Germany to fight Russia. They want Japan to fight China. They want Pakistan to stop uh, the oil gas pipeline with Iran, and they want the Saudis to fight with Iran. I mean, right? Because if the Sunnis and the Shiites, the Saudis and the Arabs and the Persians, the North Koreans and South Koreans, they all got along with one another, then
And
there's no point in having the U.S. The military base, and they
and
don't
that's what
have to.
most people want. Even the people in Korea, in Japan, they just want a normal life, trade, prosperity, as everybody else in the world. But it's just not allowed. I mean, what's the first thing they did when the Soviet Union died? They bombed and carved up Yugoslavia, because they had this idea that we can do this thing together. And yes, they had the capacity to do it. But Tikhanovskaya, the would-be Belarusian leader, is very lonely somewhere in Lithuania. I don't know where Guaido is, probably in Florida, the same place where Bolsonaro is. It's just looking like that trick from the book is that's what gives me a lot of optimism. It didn't work in Hungary as well with our last one. There was supposed to be this alphabet candidate for you, liberal, all that, and they just got their ass handed to them. Out with you. So I don't think it's working that well as it did back in the day. Even for Saudi Arabia, they are beginning to issue threats about Chinese weapons and the political consequences. France has issued a threat now because of some, I don't know who Saudi Arabia killed. I wasn't that prepared. And I saw a Korean cartoon, which is Captured Korea, South Korea. Okay, and it was, I don't have time to edit it into a slide, but a very old Captain America, and the Yoon, the Korean president, was on the shield. And like in the belt was, I think, Kishida, the prime minister of Japan, who is now a 50% disapproval rating, basically. So just last week, as we had the show on Thursday, he had these two people at Camp David sitting with him, and he fell asleep again, Joe Biden, like his little pets. And that the people of Korea and Japan, they perceived it exactly like that. Obviously, also looking at the slaughter, the blood, the fire that Ukraine is going up in, saying we're going to be next for this. I'm not sure that's going to work. I wanted to add that.
I've had some thoughts about that because I felt my thinking was insufficient, and that is, and I'm taking another look at the Sahel and ECOWAS and their supposed willingness, particularly
It's
on the
still a
part of
standoff,
Nigeria
isn't it?
and Tinubu. Why would they do that? Why would they put them in the position of Ukraine, for example? The answer, because they want to end up rubbing elbows with the Monaco battalion of Ukrainian billionaires who are living on the Riviera, fat off of U.S. taxpayer money and other monies, because for them it's
Yeah.
personal enrichment. And so when we come to Tinubu, I thought the revelations coming out of Gray Zone are very significant, taking the WikiLeaks documents and demonstrating how Tinubu was caught money laundering in Chicago
Yeah.
decades ago.
Bagman.
And the IRS caught him, and they didn't do anything about it. There was no prosecution, which would indicate to me that everybody down the line, from the DOJ to the State Department to the CIA, got a CC. This guy we can use as an asset, and that
Yeah,
he's. I don't want to be conspiratorial about it.
no, I
But
completely.
you can't. These people they'll turn in their mother for $1.
Yeah, I agree with you, but that's the comprador class who works for someone else's interest in their country. The thing is,
Yeah.
when Tinubu said we're going to go in, even his people, his Senate said no, because
Yeah,
that's
right.
different from the people. I mean, Ursula is exactly the same.
And
She
the
led
Senegalese
Europe
people
down the shitter.
right,
But-
and Senegalese people have stood up too, and I would imagine if you took a poll of other ECOWAS countries, other than the ones that are defending Niger, there'd be the same thing.
I'd like to take a poll of the Poles because they're the crazy
Yeah.
ones currently.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I wanted to let Leo get in, but I wanted
Yes.
to ask Kanthan really quick. You prefaced your commentary about last week. A U.S. delegation went over to Saudi Arabia to try and, maybe bribe them into, not selling their oil in yuan. What kind of leverage? What is the likelihood that the U.S. can get? Because to me, it sounds like the U.S. is delusional. It sounds like they don't understand what's going on. They have to try. They go to Saudi Arabia to try and pull Saudi Arabia back from, getting closer to China, making peace with Iran. Is Saudi Arabia so precarious that they could be pulled back? Or what are your quick thoughts? And then I want to get Leo's thoughts on the same question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to underestimate the U.S. Power, So for one, they can always, well, my thought is that the moment Saudi Arabia says, I'm going to do what I think is best for me, I'm going to sell oil for yuan or something like that. The moment they say that, there will be like a new revelation by the CIA who will say, oh my God, we just found these documents that prove Saudi Arabia was fully behind 9/11.
They're doing
Yeah.
that with Iran right now. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've heard. That was amazing, but because they captured this oil tanker and they unloaded the oil in Texas, and the profits of that, or the worth, I don't know, is going to the 9/11 victims, which I don't understand how that works.
Yeah. So they have a lot. I mean, like they have a few leverage, So the one would be, just like the WMD, they will certainly link Saudi Arabia to 9/11. And Saudi Arabia is not a saint, They've been
No.
funding. The Al
The Yemen
Qaeda.
war, they were involved in the Chechen ideology. They're not blameless.
Yeah, so they've been, funding. I mean, maybe not the Saudi government directly, but the billionaires in Saudi Arabia. They've been funding Al Qaeda, and the ISIS in Syria, the Chechen rebels, the Kosovo rebels.
Even the Kosovo, I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, so the CIA has a lot of dirt on Saudi Arabia. Well, although they work together, okay? So
Right.
the CIA and the Saudis were like, best buddies. As the one provided the money, the Saudis provided the money and the preachers, to spread the
Wahhabism.
ideology and to motivate the jihadists. And then the CIA would provide the arms and the training.
So when if they choose to expose the Saudis, they also expose themselves.
That's a very good point, isn't it?
Yeah, but the world is going to believe the CIA or the Saudis.
Yeah, if the Americans had more memory than a goldfish, then I think they could look back a couple of years to what they said then and what they said
Yeah.
in the other chance.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
yeah, so that's number one, and but number two, so most of Saudi money is in the dollar-based, the assets, so they can freeze all the, with trillions of dollars of Saudi assets. So those are the two, the leverage that
Yeah.
U.S. has over Saudis.
That's a good point. It's a good point.
I would say that what Ben was saying about the Iranian tanker money going to the families of the victims, I can guarantee you, I know my government and the people around it. Very little of that money will be seen by the victim
The lawyers. The
family.
Of
lawyers will
course.
get
Oh,
90%.
yeah.
Very little, you know.
That was for granted for me,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know. It's just
But I was going to say, I mean, just look at the trends. This was business articles like the Bloomberg, the WSJ, those sorts of places that the Saudis have been dumping U.S. government bonds, debt, like 4+ billion of it. So has the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, 3 billion of it. I think they've seen what Russia's done to prepare for this since 2008 or 14. And they're saying, okay, let's make some quiet moves. What was the agreement when the gold standard was gone and Nixon sent the central banker to the House of Saud? You get defense from us, the House of Saud, not Saudi Arabia. You guys, in exchange, you will always price your oil in dollars. Well, the Russians have shown that's not the latest tech. I mean, the Yemenis have already showed that. We can protect you a lot better than that. I think a lot of that leverage is gone, unless they play that you were the terrorist, you did 9/11, you did this and you did that. Fair point. But I also want to hear a little bit more from Leo.
Yeah, how big is their stake these days, and how many carrots do they have left? That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we should never underestimate them. I mean, biological warfare, they're quite capable of that. How many biolabs in Ukraine alone? Was it 200, 250, or was it 500 or something like that? US biolabs in Ukraine. But yeah, it's a conventional. Their stake is not that big anymore, and they don't have very many carrots. Saudi Arabia already defied their orders on decreasing production of oil several months ago. I mean, that was the first time, so I don't think they're very much afraid of the consequences of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to what Kanthan was saying earlier. I mean, just to briefly on the delusion that the collective West is under the spell of, in our personal lives, in individuals' life, if there is some reality that one chooses to deny, that one refuses to face, right? Whether it's whatever it is, your wife is cheating on you, or you're an alcoholic, or some reality, there will be a price to pay. Eventually, you will pay for that delusion that you entertain, that you refuse to face reality. There always is, and there will be a price to pay for the West, for the way that these governments and the media, corporate media, has been lying to the people about everything important, about everything that goes on in the world and about other countries, and it will be paid in full. We just don't know when or exactly how, but I just wanted to add that little thought. The propaganda machine, the most powerful instrument, probably, I mean, uh, of the imperialists, is also not working quite as well. There was a poll recently in Germany and France, and more than 50% of the population in Germany and France think that NATO and the West are to blame for the conflict in the Ukraine. More than 50%. And this is when the corporate media is like, just full on 24 hours, every 7 days a week, just full on NATO narrative, psycho Putin.
Putin eats babies, and part of that poll, which was done by this non-profit who did the Free Navalny campaign, by the way, part of that poll was, what do you think about Putin? And not the overwhelming, but the highest majority said he's a great leader.
Really?
That was very, very unexpected, I think, from this nonprofit. The guy is affiliated with Moscow Times, which is a Dutch, English speaking that is supposed to be in Russia but isn't.
Yeah, so when that happens, I mean, it will be very much and fun for us to watch, but it's also scary because when the house of cards begins to fall, the only recourse will be to is full on fascism, is total, first of all, total repression of any voices that
Yeah, we're
challenge.
seeing that.
Yeah, we're seeing beginning to see, and also just a bigger level, all the people in the West have been breathing this liberalism, this ideology like air their entire lives for 5, 6, 12 generations, right? And that is very, very difficult to overcome without total disassembling one's house, without disassembling the foundations that one's life is built on. And when liberalism falls, or like when its narratives are no longer tenable as they are beginning to be, I think most of the majority of Westerners will retreat into chauvinism and retreat into this European identity and blame what is happening to them not on the uh, EU Parliament, not on the people, the Atlanticist EU Parliament that has sold their subcontinent to empire, um, not sold, but allowed themselves to be used and
Subordinated, yeah.
subordinated. But they will blame the Russians and they will blame the Chinese and they will blame foreigners, as is already happening. I mean, it's not a coincidence that the only parties in these Western and the Western sphere countries who are the only political parties who are challenging the mainstream narrative or the NATO imperialist narrative are the right, who already hate foreigners, and they're already whipping up a lot of demonization of foreigners and refugees and things like this. So it's quite scary at the same time. We live in such a hopeful moment, but also terrifying.
Yeah, I agree, and I would like to ask everybody here what they feel the difference will be between the European response to what Leo just pointed up and the U.S. response. Anybody? Billy Bob, since you're right here in the heart of the beast.
Um,
West Coast.
I mean, it's definitely a concern that the Europe and the continental U.S. would be pulled by the ruling elites, and their propaganda apparatus be pulled into a a kind of right wing paranoia. But part of me, it's difficult to see that until some things happen, because right now, who's in power? What is in power is woke liberalism that would be totally opposed to mispronouncing anyone, much less calling them the N word or engaging in overt racism. So the power right now is opposite that tendency. So it's difficult for me to see how we can go from what we have now back to, Hitler. It seems like the trajectory is the opposite direction. It's a new kind of fascism, but it's not overtly racist. It's not overtly chauvinistic. But it's definitely imperialism. It's definitely fascism in a sense. But so I appreciate the question, Carlo, and I'm struggling to answer as best I can. But
Yeah, I'm
it's
curious to.
I can give. Yeah.
Well, let me just point out that, I mean, first of all, immigration is the immigrants are looked down on. I mean, it's hostility toward immigration is at a new all-time high, and that's leaning right. And then if you take somebody like DeSantis or Abbott, the governor of Texas, or or DeSantis, the governor of Florida, a presidential candidate. They're rewriting history. They're in a strictly racist context that slavery was not really a bad thing. It was a benevolent thing. Now we've had veins of this. We've had George Wallace and all that. We've gone through all this for decades. But there does seem to be with, and I don't want to get inflammatory here, but I think Trump is of that ilk, and he has been a great instrument in leaning people in that direction. And I'm going to leap over to Argentina and the primaries there. Who won? A total anti-Semite, a guy bordering on Nazism, has got the majority, 53%. Not even a runoff in the Argentine primaries. So this Millet guy, this guy is a goot stepper. Who's his handler? Steve Bannon, same guy that handled Bolsonaro. So, and if you don't think that kind of stupid could happen in the U.S., you're really underestimating white people in the U.S.
Look,
And
I'm
I
with
just want to add that. Go ahead, Ben.
I'm with you. I've seen first on the US, which I know little about, two headlines which were alarming. They came out in the past couple of days, and the first one was in let me see, the New York Times, a big one, saying elections are bad for democracy, and the other was from the Atlantic saying Americans vote too much. That was setting up the groundwork for something. Democracy doesn't really need that much democracy. Talking about the 2024 election. Now that's an interesting twist in America. As for Europe, I don't think, other than the banning of the AfD in Germany, which is still debated, I don't think we're heading in that direction. There's a certain form of censorship, but not in Hungary. I mean, would you also consider Orban one of these goose steppers? Because my granddad fought the goose steppers. Sorry to speak from authority, I'm not doing that. But these people, Orban met with all sorts of Eastern leaders, like around 10 people in one day on August the 20th. And he's doing his utmost best to engage in the diplomacy with the rising East. And obviously, one of his big selling points for most of the people was the immigration issue. Now, I'm not saying that the immigrants are the horrible people of the world or any of that. I think Europe should never have partaken in dismantling their homes. So they were forced to leave them behind.
Exactly.
But the thing is, Budapest is the safest place in Hungary. Now look at Paris. Now look at London, the knifing capital of Europe. I mean, the thing is, I've recently, and this is uncomfortable for me because in Hungary, the church played a horrible repressive role before and after socialism. They did. They were the bad guys, and I had a very, very strong feeling against them. But in Russia, I've seen the Orthodox flag and the Soviet flag in the same picture. There is a synergy forming. Most of the KPRF, the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, are practicing Orthodox Christians. They have found something that I'm struggling, I'm seeking. But I'm not sure it's that simple. Look, this sounds right, so that's right. That's a bit kindergartenish to me. And that sounds left, so that's left. I really think we need to go a little bit beyond that sort of thing. There
Yeah,
are.
of course.
Kanthan,
Go on.
what is your point of view from
Yeah,
India?
you got a little quiet. Sorry.
Yeah.
So but coming from a poor country, for me, the most important thing is the development. So when I look at the African countries or whatever, but they don't need to go to Europe, okay? And I mean, the Europeans are not doing any favor to the Africans with the refugee program. Okay, so if they want to help Africa, well, you go and build the infrastructure in Africa. Okay, you go build the roads, bridges, schools, the hospitals. So build. I mean, the colleges, so that you get the engineers and scientists from Africa. So you teach a person how to fish. That's the best way that the developed countries can help other countries. and they do stupid things, like they would give Ukraine 200, $300 billion to wage a war, and just imagine what you could do with $200 billion, but like in Africa. Okay,
Oh
so you can
Jesus,
go
yeah.
and rebuild like at the top with 20, 30, I mean, the capitals to look so beautiful, right? I mean, you can build best roads, best schools. You can go, but you can send teachers and professors to nurture the next generation of Africans. So it's so dumb that they would, bomb Iraq and then they would say, oh, well, we are so generous, we have to accept Iraqi refugees. Man, stop bombing countries. That's the first thing you
Thank you.
can
That's a
do.
great point. I wanted to make that. Thank you for expanding on
And
it.
Yeah,
it
and
sounds like the Chinese. Yes, it sounds exactly like what the Chinese ambitions are.
And
But
I came across a statistic. I think you'll like this. That one of the most cited this university with the most cited technical scientific papers in the world now is Tsinghua University in China. And that's the thing, the brain drain of the 90s. They had very skilled technical people here in Eastern Europe. By the way, when you talked about the West for 5 or 6 generations eating liberalism, we were new to this, just 30 years. But yeah, I was on the
right.
other side of that. Highly technical people. They go out to the US, they become the professors. If anybody's already watched Oppenheimer, 2 prominent Hungarian physicists were part of that program. Anyway, the brain drain was, we'll just grab these people. We don't have to build our technical universities, our scientific base, because fuck it, we can always steal these people. And China saw that. China saw what happened with the Soviet Union, saying, oh, they're going to come. Mao said this, in 3 or 4 generations, they're going to come for us and they're going to try to do this Yeltsin this sort of thing, this Gorbachev thing. I said, we must not let that. And the latest news was that, is the Bill Burns, the latest CIA guy? He said, we need to renew our networks, the CIA in China. And within 2 weeks, I think, they caught the second CIA spy in Chinese government, who was taught in Tokyo, just like the old days, the 1950s. They did the opposite in most cases. I think they've grown a hell of a lot resilient to this. I wanted to add a little bit about the brain drain, because in 2023, in retrospect, it looked like a good, which is the curse of the West, short-term solution. The short-termism is something that comes back to you over time, like the personal issues in one's life that Leo mentioned. It's gonna catch up with you sooner or later.
Yeah,
Yeah,
now the brain drain.
It's going
Sorry.
the opposite way.
It's going the opposite way, and also I just wanted to add a tiny little bit on the previous topic. What was it? Well, Argentina. I mean, it's not a surprise that, I mean, Argentina is the most Eurocentric probably of all the Latin American countries, and there I've heard many times from Brazilians, Chileans, Peruvians that Argentinians are snobs and they think they're European.
Can I quickly ask, is that the guy with the wild hair, like a Trumpy hair? Is that
Kind
the
of, yeah.
yeah,
Jesus,
yeah.
I watched a short video of him. I said, I don't want to see any more of this.
He looks like a bozo. But since we're jumping around a lot, I was just going to follow up on what Kanthan said about these African places. I mean, I've been to some places in Africa, and these places are paradisal. They are paradise. It is like, for example, in Uganda, the weather is literally perfect every day of the year. It is, you get up out of bed in shorts and a t-shirt, and at night you put on a light jacket and some jeans. Like literally every day of the year is like this, and there's coconuts and jackfruits growing everywhere. The weather is beautiful. The culture is to die for. The culture is so beautiful. People are just so genuinely connected. There's such a sense of community. Even the poor people, even when they are very poor, you don't see suffering. You don't see people like suffering like the homeless people in the West, in America, in US America. People, even the very poor people, they have communities. They are fine. They are. I mean, these places, to see them rejuvenate. Oh my God, that would be. I mean, these places are also for millennia the centers of trade and culture in Tanzania, and especially the east coast of Africa. Indians, Chinese, Arabs, Europeans, everybody went there to trade, for thousands of years. And their development, when Africa rises, I think the entire world will be healed.
I'm with you.
It's like a major organ of a body that is sick with a disease for 500 years. And when that organ heals, the entire world will rejuvenate. And this is what the imperialists want to prevent at all cost, right? If they were smart, they would build Africa well. That's the last thing they want to do. They want to prevent the independent economic power of their former slaves. They want to prevent that at all costs, and they have used everything at their disposal in order to prevent that. All the coups, all the assassinations of African leaders, all creating chaos, funding terrorism, all of this. So, like the picture of imperialism that we have is perhaps very, very clear, but it's still muddied in the perception of the world. But I think it's becoming clearer and clearer. There's simply no way to deny, the post-colonial eras in Africa. Most countries have followed the Western model of democracy, and the Western
Thank you for the air
model.
quotes. Yeah.
And where are they now? Like,
Exactly
let's
the
look
same
at
place.
fucking reality. They have followed the USA, Kenya and Nigeria, vastly resource-rich countries. They have followed the Western model, right, of like bourgeois democracy. And look what has happened. Have they developed? Has poverty decreased? No, it has
Traore
increased.
made that exact point.
Poverty-
We have been receiving French aid for 40 years, development aid, and we haven't
Yeah.
developed.
Yeah, yeah.
Not-
So
not
like,
to-
yeah. No, go on.
Not to pick on Kanthan, but the best apples to apples comparison is India China, because they both got their independence around the same time. They both have similar demographics, both similar starting points, and that China has lapped them 6 times over, and they're still growing nearly as fast as India, but they're just 6 times bigger. So I mean that's because India never had a revolution. They never got rid of the colonial way of doing governance. I mean, would you agree with that, Kanthan? Without putting, I don't want to make you ideological here.
Yeah,
Yes.
no.
I was just going to say, they have the same population now, but in the 1990s, they had pretty much the same level of development, the same.
I pissed him
No,
off.
has he dropped out?
I think that was a fluke. Hopefully, he'll be back in a sec.
Wait for him to return. On Leo's point, oh man, you put that so well. I wanted to say, okay, let's have Mr. Kanthan's question. You dropped out for a second, right? We can't hear
And
you.
now we don't have audio, Kanthan.
Kanthan, you're on mute.
Yeah, can you unmute or?
Hello? Can you say something? No, we can't hear you. Unfortunately, something's happened. Damn those technical issues.
Maybe his interwebs probably. They've got sensors and minders. They don't want us talking bad about India or comparing them to China.
I was going to say, on Leo's point.
At the perfect moment.
Imperialism has evolved so much since Lenin. First the British Empire, they were explicit, saying they're sitting on our resources, these uncivilized people. They need a flag, but we'll be there to administer them with China, with India, with all that. And later, since the decolonial so-called period started under the tutelage of the Soviet Union, they switched. Like, you're going to have democracy, you're going to have human rights, you're going to have your own black and brown leaders, but you're going to do exactly as we did, and that's how we're going to control you. And I think after that, neo-colonial, they had a taste of it, but they never had decolonialism. No,
Colonization.
Decolonization, and I think that is what's looking for the richest continent in the world, and it will change everything. Because imagine if I'm going to sell this to whoever I want to, it's not automatically yours for 1/10 of the price.
And like we hit home earlier, I mean, the SMO really, increased people's desire and motivation to decolonize and it was a lot of impetus
It
with
burst
the
a
SMO.
huge bubble, didn't it? Of the
Yeah.
imagination.
And meanwhile, the other bubble of delusion is growing ever bigger in the West.
Which one is?
The bubble of delusion is growing bigger in the West. I mean, I don't even know how these people, like the vast majority of people on Reddit and like vast majority, or not vast majority, but like all the liberals, right? Like, how do they even explain like their narrative has just fallen apart? Russia has not collapsed. They said Russia is going to collapse, and Russia is, stronger economically stronger than Germany now. Like, what the
Fifth economy in the world. It has grown richer while the West has lost around 19 trillion, according to the UBS World Wealth data.
economically, militarily, Russia is like strong, and these people, how do they like? What kind of mental gymnastics can they possibly do? It's insanity. Anyway.
You know what they're using? The unfortunate crash. It hurt me, but it saved lives, just like Leica did. The Luna 25. They call it a station, but it was an unmanned drone being sent to the moon, and it crashed. The engine fired for too long. It's under investigation, but they're saying Russia can't even go to the moon. It's called Luna 25 because they had rovers, they had probes. It's not the first time they were there, for fuck's sake, and they will go again. But that's what they have.
I mean, I believe that Russia was the first one to land on the moon in 1966. So,
with the Lukonod rover, yes.
I remember Sputnik. People were running around the U.S. pulling their hair out of their heads.
What was it like? Was it panic? Something's above us. That's Soviet. What was it like?
Yeah.
Because we were. I mean, my grandparents were basically out in the street.
It was like the hot air balloon, only worse.
It was like the Russians were equal to aliens from outer space. It's a very freaky time.
Did the U.S. space program ever have any setbacks? It seemed pretty
smooth. It blew up.
It blew up. No, it did. The Challenger blew up and like 8 astronauts died.
Yeah.
I watched it in 5th grade on live TV.
Yeah.
Kanthan, we're sorry that you have technical difficulties.
I hope we can hear you now. Sorry.
To defend India's honor. I'm just teasing. But I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add, but I wanted to give you a chance.
I think I was in the middle of asking you a question when you cut out, and I've forgotten it, so I'm sorry.
It was about India. Go on.
Yeah. So, I mean, like when I grew up, like about 500 years ago, people were more conscious. Like when I grew up, like when I was a child, as I used to fantasize about fighting the British, but now I look at the kids, like they have no sense of the past or the history, they love America, they love Britain. I cannot even talk to them, So, and also, the U.S. is a great magnet for the smartest people in the U.S. I mean, like in India, So, like, if you are a smart doctor, smart engineer, smart programmer, businessman, the people who go to the best universities in India, their dream is to go to the U.S. Okay, and you cannot but talk to them about geopolitics or about the imperialism. It just would not register, For them, like, come on, I love America. They're going to make me and my family so, secure. And, so you cannot talk, and then if you look at the foreign minister of India, okay, so his name is Jai Shankar, and his son worked for the think tanks, like
every think tank in Washington D.C.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine how dangerous that is? Like your foreign minister's son is like working for, the NATO's, the Marshall Fund, the Brookings Institution, and he like established a do not think tank in the U.S. I mean, like in India, and they don't have to think, okay, because they just have to repeat whatever the talking points that come out of Washington D.C. And he founded this think tank in India, and it gets funded by the Bill and Gates Foundation,
Oh,
blah blah blah. Oh my God, it's so terrible, you know. And yeah, you know,
while India
sometimes.
was preparing for this BRICS summit, he, the son of Jai Shankar, penned an op-ed for, I think, the Atlantic Council, saying what it's a good thing to have a naval base, a U.S. naval base somewhere in India. It's just amazing that while his dad, Jai Shankar, is one of the better foreign ministers out there, but yeah, not without, I guess you'd say, baggage.
Full disclosure, Kanthan, I've had two cardiologists, and they've both been from India. Thank you very much. Uh, and
That's fun.
one of them is very bookish. He reads a lot. He's got a house full of books. And we were talking about this unlikely set of horology. I'm a bookseller by trade, which I sold to a horologist, and that's the study of clocks and watches, by the way, to a fellow in England, and he knew all about the English interest in clocks and watches, this renewed interest, and he was like schooling me on this why I was able to sell this set so easily to this guy in England, because there's a huge interest in it. The question I have now is takes us full circle back to BRICS, and I want to ask which countries are going to be accepted into BRICS during this meeting.
Oh, that's
Oh
a
yeah.
$1 million question.
I can't afford that.
Yeah, so just from the fact, like if you look at so which leaders have or visiting, like I mean, the Indonesians. Uh, I mean, the president, he's attending BRICS. Okay, so that tells me that that there's a very good chance that Indonesia is going to be accepted.
And
you
how
know,
many
They're
people?
talking about that. Also, Ibrahim Raisi of Iran.
yes, yeah.
Indonesia has 1 billion people now. Is it close to 1 billion?
Uh, I know. As I believe it's like 200 million.
Oh, okay.
Large country.
Yeah. So, but thanks to the U.S., I mean, the influence, uh, the leaders and the officials in India, they're not too excited about BRICS expansion. I mean, it's so tragic. And they're not excited about the BRICS. The currency. They're not excited about the BRICS expansion. It's like a
Because
very
not just the US centrism, but also why don't they mend fences with China? Because I read that you probably know MK Badrakumar. He comes from a diplomatic background. He does Indian Punchline. And he said China's influence would be too large, both in expansion, both in the currency thing. And that's why India is the odd one out. Everybody agreed to expansion. That's Russia, that's Brazil, that's China, everybody except for the odd one out, the I.
yeah. So
Kanthan, would you say it would be accurate to say that the comprador class in India has stayed in political power?
Complex question.
yeah, I mean, I would. I mean, so I mean, the one problem in India is that we don't have a lot of our journalism. So it's like a lot easier for me to learn about the U.S. Than about India, which is so strange. Because I can go online and so I can read 50, 100 radical people from the U.S. and there will be some brave men like with Seymour Hirsch, who will write great stuff. We don't have anything like that in India.
Mm.
The media is like, my God, it's so horrible. It's so brainless, and uh, and we have like these a handful of the billionaires and the old rich families from the colonial days, and then some new billionaires. So they have all the power. And they
But that sounds
control all
like a
the.
comprador class. That sounds like a comprador class that Leo was describing. And you guys had independence in 47, but it's always been run by a comprador elite. It seems like. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, I mean,
Gandhi, of
So they
course.
changed though,
co-
so they
co-
changed, so it's not like, so for like a long time they were like, like maybe like 4 or 5 big families, and now we have some new families,
Yeah.
and as I'm not sure if they're all in bed with each other or it's
Really.
a friendly competition, but there is a broad, yeah, so like there is a broad comprador class.
Kind of like
yeah, I
Trump is
mean,
in competition with Biden, but they both come from the same.
Yeah,
it is different. I mean, replace the word comprador with sold. Sold means to one camp, which means the US, basically 100% US camp, and you're going to do everything we say. But I see, for instance, Narendra Modi, who have a lot of criticism of. Believe me, I'm sure you have even more. He's doing the Erdogan game. He's trying. I understand the position. He's trying to wrestle whatever he can from the west and whatever he can from the east. Orban is doing the same, only in smaller, because we're tiny. We're 10 million people. But that's a game you can't play forever. That's how I see it from the outside looking in. So I don't think it's entirely, even if the media is entirely like attached at the hip to the West, and definitely not with the East, because there's very friendly and historic relations with Russia, which you
Yeah.
recently posted that's one good thing that India has in the foreign policy, and a lot of Indians hated you for that
yeah.
in the comments.
So I mean,
Mhm.
so personally, well, I would like India to have a strategic autonomy. Okay, I mean, so don't be allies uh, with anyone, and don't be hostile to anyone. So be friends with the U.S. and be friends with China, be friends with Russia, and you work with each one of them. Like you find. What is the expertise of each person, like each country, so you go to China and you say, hey, Mr. China, well, you are so good in building factories. Okay, so you are so fantastic with cars and washing machines and with TVs and stuff. So you come to India and you build those, and then you go to the US and you say, hey, Mr. US, well, you're so
Weapons?
good with
Social media,
Netflix and with
Netflix.
Google and Facebook, whatever, the software, the financial stuff. So you help us. And you go to
Ooh.
Russia, you get the best weapons, you know. So that's good, but they're not doing that. So they become so intensely anti-China, for no reason,
What
and then they're like way too much aligned with the British and the Americans.
Well, what you described when you talked about let's go to America, I thought you would say weapons, because that's what they do, apparently. But you described, which was interesting to me, IT and finance. And yeah, they're good at that in the US. But those are very crucial for the country's independence. I mean, that's the control of everything, including public opinion, which explains why the journalism in your country is in a sad state that you described. And that means that this balance you're trying to strike is very, very lopsided, it sounds like to me.
Yeah, so you bring up a very, very good point. Okay, so I have to clarify that.
Yeah.
So the mistake that India did is to go to Google and say, why don't you take over the Indian market? So come and establish Google, become establish WhatsApp, become establish with Cisco, 5G. Okay,
Not
that's not the
Indian
way to do
brands.
it. Okay, so the way to do it is to establish like an Indian firm, but like an Indian search engine, Indian YouTube, and then you give like 40% of the shares to Google. You know, but you control the
Yeah.
stuff,
It's the
but you
control
get
that matters. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, so you get Google's technology, and then for that, in return, you give 40% of your shares to Google. But you control the content,
And the
and you
technology, the Chinese model. Yeah.
yeah, so they go like 0 100 in the wrong ways. Okay, so but they wouldn't allow the Chinese. The electric car giant, BYD.
BYD, build your dream. Yes.
Yeah, so BYD wanted to build a factory in India. Okay, so like, if I were the prime minister, I would roll out the red carpet for BYD. I'd be like,
Indonesia
buddy,
did that.
come. Huh?
Indonesia did that, and they had the G20 meeting there, and the whole fleet was BYD and new electric vehicles. Sorry.
Yeah, so that would be the smart thing to do, right? So you bring in BYD and you say, hey, so you share, with us with some of your technology. So maybe not the core technology, but like a lot of that, and in return, you can make a lot of money in India. Okay, but rather than that, they just blew BYD off completely. Okay, and then they go to Nokia and Ericsson.
Wait, those are still
Cisco.
around?
Yeah, but they do the 5G.
Ah,
Okay, so if you look at 5G in India, it's like 100% foreign. But they put the Made in India label on it. It's all fake labels. you know, so that's not very smart.
No,
no.
no, it's not. And I would just have to add, your idea is good. That would be a smart thing to do, but I'm not sure how possible that is because the U.S. don't really. That's not in their modus operandi to, again, help other countries develop. Even in a deal like this that may look fair on the surface. I mean, what they're doing now in countries like Poland. I was talking to a Polish friend of mine here in Berlin who is not very, deep political thinker. He says, "Oh, Poland is doing great. Our economy is rising, and there's a lot of U.S. Investment in the
Oh,
tech sector. There's a lot of Google is moving in, and he just does not understand how like when Google moves in, when Twitter moves in or X moves into a country, they take over, and they will use your population, the best and the brightest, suck them into their offices and make the country into San Francisco where homeless people literally crawl on the streets like rats and these 200,000 euro SUVs zoom past to go to their gated community, from their gated community to the beautiful lush Google offices. That's what Poland is going to look like, and none of it will be controlled by Poland. None of it will benefit Polish people. It will be just a playground for tech bros from like fucking Nevada, from California. So
yeah.
like that's how Americans do, like to get a fair deal out of like U.S. corporations. I don't know.
Yeah,
I love it.
that's just been the modus operandi forever.
It was so
I,
poignant, wasn't it?
I, well,
What Leo said.
I remember I remember before Jacopo Arbenz, Guatemala had the president Juan Arevalo, and he wrote a book called The Shark and the Sardines, and the shark, of course, being the U.S. One of the things he tried to do is institute a literacy policy. So his country didn't have simple uh, materials like pads of paper and pencils and crayons and that sort of thing. So he ordered a bunch of this material on his very limited budget from an Eastern Bloc country. I think it was at the time Czechoslovakia. So the ship is coming over. Coming through the Gulf. The United States interdicts it, goes to that shipment of school supplies, and dumps it into the Gulf to thwart this education program, adult education, child education, the whole thing. That's the United States for me in a nutshell. But I want to go back. Okay, let's try this. Is Cuba going to be accepted into BRICS? Is Nicaragua or maybe even more importantly at this point, Venezuela, because of its oil? I mean, what? Come on, guys. Come on, give me some predictions.
Okay, so I think they're going to establish stages of membership. So you start out as like an observer, and there is with some other term, and then you become a full member. So I think that would be the compromise, because India and Brazil have a lot of the hesitancy in doing a fast expansion. So I think they will say, okay, so let's have these stages of membership like they do for SCO. So that's my prediction.
Okay, I will say who have already demonstrated a willingness to part with the West, one for many, many decades, others recently. Iran, certainly. I'm going to say Nicaragua because President Ortega just signed a decree that says Russian bases and Russian cruise missiles can be on Nicaragua's territory. Big, balls move. Cuba, who are increasing diplomatic cooperation with Lavrov, including security measures. I mean, a Russian fleet has never docked in Cuba except for the last 3 or 4 weeks ago. I think it was big news at the time. There's new, Fidel and Che statues being raised in Moscow. But I want to harken back a little bit to what Leo said. That point, I love the fact that the Polish are making fun of Russia because Luna 25 crashed. They had one cosmonaut, Miroslav, a long Polish name that I'm not going to try because I'm going to butcher. And the Soviet Union took him up. He was just like Bertalan Farkas, the one Hungarian cosmonaut. They don't have a space program, I don't think. I'm not aware of it. But what you said, it was so poignant that they will transform you into this. If you give over the IT, if you give over the IP to your stuff, that I just have to say that was brilliant and poignant.
Yeah. Great commentary, Leo. You just came from Poland. You were on vacation. You want to just tell us about your experience there?
Yeah, we're in Gdansk, port city, on the blocks on the I always forget, but anyway. Deindustrialized. We went to this typical hollowed out deindustrialized center of the city. These ports had factories that are completely abandoned.
Oh, we got that.
Yeah. And that used to employ hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And now they're completely defunct. And the derelict factory spaces are impressive. It's great for artists. We saw quite a few artist studios that moved in there and that are doing weird whatever sound art and hip stuff. I come from that background, so I have a very, very personal affinity to that type of stuff. And there are these very cool spaces that have sprung up for young people to hang out, and it's quite nice, but it's very superficial. It's going to last 5 years at the most, or it will become just playground for Google employees. They will probably take over, rebrand it, or maybe keep the underground cool and just completely saturated with their employees. But yeah, it's the place. What can I say about it? It's everyone wearing T-shirts that say Arkansas, in Poland. What the fuck?
Like NASA T-shirts in Hungary. I so hate that.
NASA, so much NASA shit. I feel like they've been pushing the NASA gear on people.
In Eastern Europe, definitely.
Consumer market in Germany as well. There's a lot of NASA stuff. But anyway, it's similar to what you describe, Kathan, of the young people in India. They are just completely Americanized. It's just like all the TV and movies, and like they love America. And oh yeah, we went to a party that was in that same area randomly, and it was not bad. The DJs were good, but all the music was American trap, American hip hop with a little bit of UK jungle, which was nice. The double time, doom ka, doom ka. Like it was a nice DJ set, but like zero music from anywhere else, just purely American and English music, and all these young people just dancing to it. I mean, yeah, it's really strange. It's very weird.
You mentioned anti-Semitism being a little bit normalized.
Oof.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
A friend
it
of
was
ours.
before the show, but tell the story.
Yeah, a friend of ours is Jewish, and so she notices these things quite a bit. I posted some photos on my social media. She saw this one pendant that you can buy for your house just to decoration. It's of a racist caricature of a Jew with the curls and the hat and the beard, a Hasidic Jew, and with a giant dollar sign. And there's a text that says, "If you want to get rich, befriend a Jew. If you want to get rich, keep a Jew around in the house," or some things like this. It's just sold in gift shops everywhere. It's rather insane.
Maybe Google can help get rid of that kind of culture. I mean, maybe they can bring their wokeism.
See, okay, this is what I wanted to touch on. What you said earlier, Bob.
Bob. Sorry.
Bob. I don't know your real name, so
It's just Billy Bob. That's what.
Billy Bob.
I've never heard Bob before. Yeah.
What you said earlier, I'm not sure if there is going to be any contradiction that cannot be, that cannot be paved over with the wokeness and rising fascism. I think the new fascism.
They can turn it around on the drop of a dime. They'll just change it.
No, the axis of personal identity can be manipulated any which way.
Can you do that in abject poverty? Because last year during winter, Poland famously, you can smell it in the air. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but there were headlines about them burning rubbish for heating. Okay.
Sure.
I mean, the amount, I don't have the exact billions in front of me, but I did look into this. The billions they've borrowed from Goldman Sachs, from American, from South Korean banks to remilitarize, to buy all this military stuff. That's going to be there for fucking generations. That has to be paid. It's just, it looks like a slow motion suicide to me.
Anti-Semitism has been around in Poland. They've been famous for that for centuries.
Yeah.
Only worse are the Baltic midgets.
Protocols of Elders of Zion and all that crap kind of
but
shit.
Leo, you were making a point.
Yeah. Wokeism and all of this virtue signaling regarding personal identity and racism and sexism, it's not going to be a problem for the new fascism at all. The new fascism is using it very, very well to their ends. They say, that's why we have to fight the Russians and the Chinese, because they're not woke, because they are, because they're anti-LGBT, they're nationalists, and they're, it can be manipulated any which way they want. And Fidel Castro, famously said the new fascism will be called democracy.
Well, actually, it can go. You're right. It can go either way, because here we have it going in the absolute opposite way. We have Ron DeSantis in Florida, who is attacking any kind of what is called wokeness, which is basically history. The same thing happening with this, I think his name George Abbott, whatever, the governor of Texas. They're changing. They're altering. They're literally saying that slavery was not bad, that slavery could be reintroduced because and this is from the right, and given white Americans, they're lapping it up. In fact, it was the whole aegis behind Trump. That's where it came from. That's its source. Racism. I can listen to Max Blumenthal blow it out his pink ass all day long, but if I ever run into him on the street here in DC, I'm going to say, Max, It's fucking racism. That's what's driving all of this. And I don't think I don't think I think the wokeism you gotta. It's like my friend Wooter Peters put it. On the left, we have to be less lazy. We can't be this lazy. What we have to do is see that the wokeism that we're seem to be in contention with is being foisted on us by the very powers that be, the very people that want to control everything. So it's not the problem is there are real people defined as being within the context of woke that are under threat. Under threat. I don't want to get too anecdotal about this, but in Billy Bob's state, a woman was just shot dead. She had 9 children, shot dead because outside her shop she kept a rainbow flag. You know, and it's this maniac, this idiot, shot her dead. Now people will go, well, you can't blame DeSantis, you can't blame Trump. Yes, I can. Yes,
Well,
I can.
the thing is, right? Woke the woke agenda, the liberal establishment imperialist woke
But
agenda.
they're just using real people.
Yes, they are.
You got to get beyond that.
Absolutely. They don't merely court reaction from their totally insincere, surface level, but intensely pushing all of this stuff, right? Woke stuff, right? They don't merely court reaction; they demand. I mean, reaction is a part of the game, right? To whip up the reaction against that, and that's how they manipulate people. Is when there is contention, when there's intense contention among the population, they are divided.
But
and nobody talks about class.
Here
and
on
nobody,
the left, we have to refocus people to go after that lie, because the people that are covered under this rubric of woke, they don't want to die. They're in the line of fire. This mother of nine's in the line of fire. I have never seen any CEO in the line of fire. Look, I used to have this argument with my uncles in Cleveland because they were like all racists and hardcore racists. We're going to shoot the niggers. That's why I have this boulder in my front yard, so I can hide behind this boulder and shoot the niggers when they come out of Cleveland into Parma. And it's like, okay. And I would go, well, you've got 350 million guns in this country. Go after the CEOs. Go after the people that are really destroying your lives. This is Cleveland. Look at that. It's right in the Rust Belt. Everything is dead here. You're dead.
Yes, but every time white people try to work with black people to fix something, people like you come ahead and just scream, those whites want to kill you. How is that fucking productive? I'm sorry I jumped in from the outside, but this really is...
They don't need me to tell them that. They're being killed in great numbers by the whites.
It's 2023. It's not the 70s.
They don't need to know that. They don't need me to tell them that. They know that. Listen, that idiot Barnes was on the McCorris and Christoforous show again.
That's when I know to skip it.
He literally said this, and this is how much they're pulling it out their ass. He literally said that blacks love Trump because they see Trump as an underdog, just like they are in this culture. And I'm telling you something. Number one, they don't. Number one, they fucking don't. Number two is, how dare he talk about blacks being underdogs? How dare he put them in that position? They are not in that position. They are every bit dogs as every other American are. So I'm telling you that there's a rock and a hard place where this woke stuff is basically being used by everybody for political gain, for economic gain, for whatever. And there are huge groups of people in the line of fire. And
if I could maybe steel man as opposed to straw man Carlo, I mean, I agree. I think his point is accurate. Like, I mean,
yeah, I agree with that.
There's minorities that are vulnerable and at risk. and wokeism does protect them and try and speak out against the historic oppression that these minority groups have had, and in that way it's definitely great. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say what the CIA uses wokeism, right? Yes,
Absolutely, they do.
remember political correctness. You know where that phrase came from? Dartmouth, right-wing little think tank that controls the college magazine at Dartmouth. They have a whole crew of people. It's the CIA has these people. All of this stuff comes from sources that are have no interest at all. Wokeness. I mean, the whole way of defining these people via wokeness is bullshit. They don't define themselves as woke. They just want to fucking live. It's like it's like Kanthan. He's gone, but Kanthan had this thing on his site where he had two different things. It was one with Chinese students studying textbooks in engineering, and then it was another one with a transgender man reading a book to children in kindergarten. And his thing was, this is why there's a difference. That's a canard. That is just simply not real. That's a canard.
I completely disagree, but I'm the Eastern European. I learned a lot of the Indian perspective, even the Polish perspective. And for you, I differ on American matters because right now I feel culturally a lot closer to Russia than I do to the US. I'm going to end it there. We've gone on for an hour and 40 minutes. What do you guys think? Getting to the finishing thoughts?
Yeah, I wanted to maybe change subjects a little bit. I want to try and make a point about this polling that was recently done worldwide describing who is the biggest threat to peace around the planet. And it was kind of, actually Mike Whitney in his most recent article at UNS talked about this poll. And ostensibly it says that, people are blaming China. People are saying China is, the biggest threat to peace. But if you look at the polling, if you look at how the methodology was done, it's really those high economy countries that have access to, that the U.S. controls the propaganda there, right? So it's Western propaganda that is driving this this anti-China narrative. And if you actually take apart the polling and you look at the actual data, the vast majority of the world is pro-China. They see that the U.S. is the biggest threat to global peace. But they skewed and they manipulated the results, and then they came out with headlines saying, China is the biggest threat. But it's basically driven by Western propaganda. So the culture war, Netflix, Twitter, or whatever it's called now, Western social media going into these places drives people's opinions into the direction that, is convenient for Western imperialism. So we've kind of talked about that. I wanted to kind of wrap that up. We're a little bit sidetracked with the domestic thing. And so it's good that we have disagreement. It's hard to identify exactly where we disagree because I think, there's some, I think sometimes what Carlo is saying that we're saying we're not saying, and that what Carlo is actually saying we agree with, and yet it comes across like we don't agree or something. But it's complex. It's a complex reality that we're trying to parse. And I feel honored that everybody is joining us and to be a part of this discussion. I want to thank everybody for joining us. But we are an hour and 44 minutes in. I'm good for another 15 minutes, but I don't know if anybody has anything they want to say or a topic you want to hit on. But I'll open it back up.
Go, Leo.
Very quickly, finish my earlier thought because I didn't really get to finish it completely about that the new fascism will be incorporating all of the woke values without any problems. Because if we look at history, I mean, the founding fathers talked about equality for all while owning slaves.
Yeah. The
right?
hypocrisy.
I mean, the Catholic Church talked about compassion while while giving the moral justification for the genocide of Australian Aborigines, right? I mean, so this kind of like ideological disconnect and total contradiction is not a problem for fascism. Has never been a fascist problem for fascism. I mean, we have neo-Nazis that make hip hop today. There's like zero problem. But anyway, that's all.
No, the contradiction. I mean, the hypocrisy internal to these propaganda systems. You're right. It's always
They've
been there.
always
It's a
been
constant.
like that.
I wanted to make the point. I mean, I want to quickly end on Yevgeny Prigozhin, who's turned up in Africa. I mean, can we now agree that it was completely Maskirovka on the Russian side? You know, the shadow game.
Completely what? Completely what on the
Maskirovka is the Russian word for like a disinfo campaign or something for show. You know.
Oh, you mean the rebellion?
The rebellion, the revolution, when they were freedom fighters in the Western press for about a week, and then they were not. He was the traitor, and now he's just freely in Africa, like we're going to help and do whatever we want. But I want to say that this is, as a Hungarian to whom this issue was introduced in the last 30 years, it is a wedge issue designed to separate people. They did this with Yugoslavia. They did this with all kinds of places. I don't know why people can't learn that this is a way to separate grandma from granddaughter, from the friend from friend, because you either have the rainbow flag or you shoot the guy with the rainbow flag. That's what they want. Okay, I'm sorry I got worked up. I find it more productive to discuss things than fight with Carlo. So my apologies, Elder.
I always find it more productive to fight with Ben.
Yeah, but I'm afraid you'd explode.
We're worried about your heart, Carlo. We're taking it easy.
What's that?
We're worried about your heart.
Yeah, well, I lost my patience 57 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
I lost my patience with this
today.
shit.
Yeah,
I mean,
sorry.
look at, some of the things.
Kanthan.
I was there when the civil rights movement was there. I mean, I've been through it all, so I say if you don't stand behind these people, and I mean the people themselves, not the hype, not the economic intentions or the political intentions, then just fuck it. I
understand.
So
I just said it stops them from holding hands. It stops them from uniting, which is what you and I also want.
Well, I mean, for a while I was cleaning. I don't want to get too anecdotal, but I was cleaning public spaces, and one of the places my friend and I cleaned was Dr. Castor's office in DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C. And we cleaned it after hours. And we go in like at 8 or 9, and Dr. Castor's was still working. He worked with AIDS patients. He worked so fucking hard to save so many lives. It was heart-rending, So
yeah, the AIDS epidemic.
I just have this visceral sense when people are victimized like this nonsense around wokeism. Not even a real term. It's all bullshit. It's like there are real people that die around this crap.
You're a good man, a compassionate man with a great heart. I would never hold that against you. But
I mean, it's just, and you just see it over and over again. How people with no power, the lowest people in the culture, are victimized over and over and over again.
And blamed for the problems.
And blamed for the problems.
Not the rich people, but the poor people, powerless.
The poorest people, the people, the people that are ill, the people that don't have money. They're just never mind.
Yeah.
It's just
I think
obvious. That's what this
heartfelt
fucking
note.
country's about. To prey on the poor and to let the fucking rich. I mean, you people have heard Elon Musk speak. You think that guy is intelligent? He's a dipshit. He's an idiot.
Dropout.
We didn't even get around to Teschial yet, which I was hoping we could.
We always keep
about.
having Mr. Kanthan back, and we want to talk about AI. We really do. But
we do. We want to talk about Teschial.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay,
appalled.
that will be a fascinating topic next time.
I'm appalled. I hope you're as appalled as I am.
What do you think about leaving it at that really heartfelt message, which I feel I completely agree with?
Kanthan, again, thank you for joining us. I know you had some technical issues. We're sorry about that. Was there anything else you wanted to add in closing? I know we've been monopolizing your ears and not listening to you for the past several.
No, it's okay. So so you folks have a show on Thursday. So I think that you will be able to talk a lot about what happened with BRICS.
Yes.
So that should be a good show for you guys.
Only in an hour, because it's limited, that one, unlike this one.
Okay.
Plus, our
So
guest.
yeah, so I think so looking forward in the near term, so we should focus on what's happening with BRICS and in the Middle East to see what Saudi Arabia will decide. And so Latin America should be big stuff, whether they're going to go with the multipolar world or some crazy Argentinian leader with some wacky ideas. And like in Asia, we have to see if Japan and South Korea are going to fall for the mini World War III plans. So the next few months should be very fascinating.
And we're going to invite you back, and we appreciate you joining us. Leo, thank you so much for jumping on last minute. We have our Thursday program. It's 1 hour, and then Tuesdays we don't have a hard break, but we'll definitely have a lot to discuss this coming Thursday. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Carlo. I'm going to hit end broadcast, and that'll be it. Thanks again.